Ambition is one of the most dangerous drugs in the world. When you get an idea in your head, one that could take you to levels you've never dreamed of before, it's hard to pull it out. That goes doubly so in the case of Spore. The little video game that could, Spore was the brainchild of Will Wright, creator of The Sims, SimCity, anything with Sim in the name, basically. Now, despite looking like a math teacher who stresses how much you need calculus for your job at Dairy Queen, Will Wright is one of the few people in the gaming industry you could truly call an auteur. You know when you're playing a Will Wright game, whether it's the particularly quirky sense of humor, clean user interface, or deep background elements. Will Wright's style of game making is directly tied to his philosophy on learning. He believes that games are like toys that can teach us so much about life by letting children learn, fail, and succeed at their own rate. As such, a special game entered development in 1994 titled Sim Everything, an awful title which was eventually dropped in favor of Spore. What Spore was an exploration of the idea of evolution, letting players dictate how a single-celled organism goes from swimming around in a single dewdrop, to an animal running around eating and mating, to a tribe warring with other races, to a civilization aiming for global domination, all the way to a spacefaring species. The idea's scope was massive, literally making a whole universe for the player to explore. As such, Will and his team Maxis had a lot of time to work on the project. In fact, the game wouldn't be seen until 2005. The demo shown off is a lot different than what you probably associate with Spore today. It was a lot more gritty and realistic, rather than the colorful and playful slant that Spore ended up with. It was also in watching this demo that I nearly caved my head in with the blunt end of a hammer, listening to Will say the words, procedurally generated.
This entire world you see here is procedurally generated in a procedural way. They're all generated procedurally, all procedurally. Procedurally generated to the procedural mating. No, I still can't go after the brown guys.
Yes, procedural generation, one of those fancy schmancy book learning terms you hear a lot in games, right next to morality systems and loot boxes. How procedural generation would work in Spore was tied very heavily to the game's innovative creature creator. Spore would give the player the ability to craft their creature however they wanted, like making it out of clay, and thanks to the procedural generation, the AI would know exactly how that creature would move. An example given would be giving a creature 4 legs and watching him gallop like a horse. However, not all is clip-clopping and procedural generation in the land of Spores. The game saw several delays ahead of its eventual September 2008 release date. But hey, at least the hype machine going into Spore was massive, thanks in parts to the game's developers. That has to be the most embarrassing tramp stamp I've ever seen. EA was the longtime publisher of Will Wright's works of worthwhile wonder, and Spore would be no different. And seeing what a media juggernaut franchises like Dante's Inferno and Dead Space would go on to be under EA's hype machine, Spore was in good hands. Not only was the base game of Spore to be made, but a massive amount of spin-offs too, including ones for the Wii, DS, and mobile phones. No, not those mobile phones, you literal fucking infants. These things that could conceivably double as a murder weapon. Of course, these would be developed by outside studios like Full Bat, Kryptonite, and Barbaroga. I could have made one of those names up, and you wouldn't even have a clue which one. So the fated day finally came, and Spore was in the hands of the consumer. However, EA fucking hated that fact, and lobbied to kill the game with everyone's least favorite letters in their least favorite order. DRM. Standing for Digital Rights Management, Spore's DRM was made to make sure that you couldn't swap your disc with a friend in order to give them the game for free. How it would have worked was that when Spore was installed on a computer, you would have needed an authentication code that came with your physical copy. That code could only be used 3 times before Spore wouldn't install anymore. So imagine being a stupid kid, bows in your hair and rocks where your brain should be, smashing your dad's keyboard to make the game about making penis creatures work, only to realize that you needed the little slip of paper that came with the box to make it work. Not that anything like that happened to me. So, needless to say that this was liked by, exactly no one, and really hurt Spore's reputation. So much so that when the game was released on Steam, it had no DRM, and people who already installed the game could now install it 5 times! Oh, EA, you spoil me! But this is all talking about Spore without actually saying anything about Spore, so without further ado, let's get on to the actual meat of things. Spore. So when starting the game, you get this cool galaxy menu that actually acts as the galaxy for your whole game. When starting out, you'll only have the option to start at the cellular stage. You fly in on a meteor before crashing into the world, popping out as your little guy, and depending on if you chose herbivore or carnivore, it's time to get to work eating. For herbivores, you can only get food from the world around you, but as a carnivore, you can kill other cells to get what you want. Now, this does create the issue of herbivore being the conservative Christian parent way to play the game, a problem that increases in magnitudes as the game goes on, and since I want to keep my pulse above a level that will put me into cardiac arrest, I'll be playing as carnivore. The cell stage is super simple. All you do is swim around, look for your particular food type, eat it, get evolution points, and breed. Speaking of those evolution points and parts, you can call a mate at any time to go into the creature editor. I'll go into more depth at the next stage, but as it is now, it's a fun way to add more stuff to your creature. Harvesting the parts from fallen cells who had the power is a fun Mega Man way to collect them, but if you play as a defenseless herbivore, you can either find them in meteors, or just collect them from the cells that other cells kill. The problem with this part of the game is both its length and its complexity. You will get bored of this gameplay style really quickly. It's either just clicking or using the keyboard to swim at food, or run away from threats. That's it. Then it'll only take you about 10 minutes tops to complete. It's not like this is a tutorial, seeing as the rest of the game plays totally different, so while it's cute, this stage is utterly pointless. After slaughtering enough prospective intelligent life to leave the tide pool, it's time to strap some legs to our f***ed up looking dog, or in my case realize that this creature is unworthy of them, and it's time to advance to the creature stage. Originally there was supposed to be an aquatic stage where you played as a fish before making it onto dry land, but somewhere late into development that ended up getting cut. When you make it onto dry land, you're driven down one of two paths based on what you eat. If you're an herbivore, you can politely go up and ask other creatures to be your friend, or if you're a carnivore, you can eat them. Or, if you found the correct parts during the cell stage, you can become an omnivore who can eat plants and meat and fulfill either criteria. Now, that isn't to say you can't be a super nice carnivore or a bloodthirsty herbivore, just saying it's going to be a lot harder than doing things the normal way. Your mission is to either befriend or extinct enough species so that you can evolve your brain to full-on intelligence. How you end up going about this is with the least thrilling gameplay possible. Regardless of if you're using social or combat skills, all you'll be doing is pressing 1, 2, 3, or 4 depending on the situation. For social, when trying to woo another creature, just copy what they're doing, either sing, dance, charm, or pose. For combat, it's all about mashing 1 since Bite has the fastest cooldown, hitting 2 to charge only if you're a certain distance away to quickly close the gap, hit 3 to do a strike every few seconds since it's just a bite with more damage, and hit 4 to use poison if you want to run away and fight at the same time. Truly the bravest way to fight. How you go about equipping these new skills is with evolution. Sure, it might be fake in the real world, but at least it's real in Spore. By either making super best BFFs with the other races or killing the young ones so the bloodline ends, you get new evolution parts. They can also be found in these bone piles around the world, and once you have them, you can mate like in the cell stage. There you get the far more robust creature creator and get to go to town with all sorts of design features. This is one of Spore's most defining features. People have made some masterpieces with the Spore creature creator, while others have made the sort of thing that stand at the foot of my bed when I have sleep paralysis. It's a masterclass in character customization for really allowing you to create whatever you want, with the only limits being your own imagination. That being said, there are still problems with it. First off, that procedural generation Will wouldn't shut up about didn't really pan out exactly right. See, you can put as many limbs as you want on the creature, but that's not going to change how it moves. It's going to move the exact same way every other Spore creature moves, which is awkwardly. The worst part, however, is how dependent playing a good creature is on discarding what you want to design. My first couple generations didn't have arms because I didn't think it would fit my creature. However, since Strike, the best combat skill, is locked behind giving your creature hands, I had to give him arms anyway. Not just that, if you want your creature to stand a chance and not get bodied, you're gonna have to give him the same parts every time. You're gonna give him the feet that have the best charge, the mouth with the best bite, the hands with the best strike, and that means even if other body parts would fit the creature you want to make, you have to discard them if you want to survive. It's baffling why you'd give the player all these tools, but invalidate them in so many different ways. But whatever, soon my creature got to the point that I'm happy with, and we trek on to— Oh, that's right. Spore's a little bit of an old game, you see. See, it's got these cute little kinks. It crashes. Oh, it crashes all right. Sometimes from alt-tabbing, sometimes to try to get cute with the gameplay, sometimes you're just wearing the wrong color shirt, but it'll crash. And Spore doesn't have an autosave feature. Instead, it expects you to save manually all the time. So when it crashes, and it will crash, unless you've been saving manually like a f***ing psychopath, all your progress goes away in a flash. Please excuse me. One new species and an infinite amount less effort later, and the creature stage is history. This is the most involved in terms of individual gameplay of all the stages, with the game becoming a lot more about managing groups than an individual. Personally, I prefer the individual style to what the game becomes, but even then there's a lot of work that needs to be done here before I call this creature stage fun. Next up is Tribal Stage, and I do believe that's the sound of Spore entering its bad part. Yes, Tribal Stage is where many players, my kid self included, decide that this game was poopy and didn't want to play it no more. After your creature gains enough intelligence, it starts to form its own society, and in this society you have to gather food to build buildings and create new tribesfolk. The shift in gameplay from whatever the heck the creature stage is to an RTS isn't as jarring as you'd think, to be honest. The previous stages did feel slightly like you were playing an RTS as one of the units, so switching to a full-blown game of it isn't the worst thing ever. What is the worst thing ever is just how slow it all is. Instead of getting to take the reins of your creature to guide how you please, you get to watch your tribe folks slowly gather either fruit or meat so they can spend it on new units or building buildings to give you either instruments or weapons. Herbivores are better with instruments and carnivores are better with weapons. You can use these as various other tribes spread up around the world, and you either have to befriend them or paint the ground with their gray matter. The problem comes from the fact that unless you go out of your way, every tribe hates you by default. So if you're playing herbivore and trying to make friends with them, you'll get a bad time as your marching band gets torn apart by feral raccoons. So just slaughter the lot of them and win through war, right? Wrong! Every time you send your full troop out to fight the enemy, no matter how well armed you are and how crap their ranks are, they will always have the advantage. No matter how you split up your units, they will always have the advantage. Weapons have literally no visible effect on them. Every time you try to swing an axe or chuck a spear, you might as well be fighting with your claws. This game does a phenomenal job of making you feel totally powerless at all times. Even when you're raising tribes to the ground, you still feel like whatever you end up fighting next is going to be stronger. And it's not like it's worth building anything that isn't a weapon or an instrument hut, as the other ones like the healing rods and fishing hooks are practically worthless for how little they accomplish. All right, boys, let's go get that paper. And everyone died. Okay, boys, good hustle. We'll get them next time. Tribal Stage is so boring that I genuinely almost gave up. I thought it would have been too much to get through the stage again after having played it so many times. But somehow, me and my race managed to soldier on into the Civilization Stage. The Civilization Stage is an interesting beast, as it was actually developed by the same project lead behind Civilization 4, Soren Johnson. Civilization 4 is one of the best entries in the whole franchise, so it has to translate to the Civilization Stage being one of the best parts of... Oh, god damn it! So the Civilization Stage keeps a lot of DNA from the Tribal Stage, but instead of commanding tribes, folks, you command cars, boats, and planes you design yourself, as well as buildings in your functioning city. Building these is not nearly as fun as building your creature. With your vehicles, you can claim spice geysers around the planet in order to make more money, as well in turn facilitate the running of your cities. Meanwhile, other civilizations spread up around the planet, and disappointingly, they're all the same species as your own. Based on being a servile lapdog, a rabid murder hound, or a somewhere in the middle cocker spaniel, you'll be a religious, military, or economic power. If you're a military power, you have to blow up everyone else until they submit. If you're a religious power, you have to convert cities with the word of gospel. The only problem is that converting people works the exact same way that bombing them does. You just get to claim the moral high ground afterwards. But then there's the economic route. Take my advice. Don't. In order to win the economic way, you'll need to buy all the other towns instead of conquering them with either violence or prayer circles. That means that you need to spend all your time waiting around for your money to pile up and then immediately give away to anyone who's looking at you funny, so they'll be nice to you like a trust fund child paying off their bullies. This is done with your army of cars, boats, and planes. Cars are your ground infantry. They're super slow no matter how much speed you tech into them, but they can be sent out in droves to kill anything they come into contact with. Boats... Oh, boats. Boats are so useless that genuinely I never even bothered making them. Boats are good for acquiring landlocked spice geysers in order to make more money and battling coastal enemies. This wouldn't even be a problem if not for the fact that by the time you've conquered 3 cities, you get the plane. Dump every other vehicle and get the plane. Planes can fly anywhere that you want and bomb anything without mercy. They're stronger and faster than cars and boats and allow you to travel anywhere. They're stupid broken and take away from any challenge that seizing towns can present, since no other army will ever have the military that's close to your size. However, this still takes an agonizing amount of time, and regardless of how different the 3 paths seem, they all come down to just who has the most vehicles. For making such a big deal out of this being made by the same guy who helped make Civilization 4, this mode is incredibly shallow. If the tribal stage doesn't bore you into submission, Civilization comes in with a tag team assist to kill any and all momentum. It boils down to the method that's the most fun but also requires the least amount of thought, the same thing as military but with Jesus instead of WMDs, and the method that you should only try if you have a weekend to waste. But once your civilization rules the world, your race will grow sad. All shores have been conquered, except for the endless sea of the stars! Finally, you reach the space stage, and with it the most robust and full experience Spore has to offer. For the rest of the review, I've been speaking on the game from all perspectives, but going forward I'll only be talking about it from the perspective of a warfaring race. Genuinely, playing as a zealot or a traitor is so boring that I couldn't even bring myself to play those routes. After you design your spaceship, you go through the ringer of tutorials, getting accustomed to your new ship, all its functions, and how to travel from planet to planet. After a test of your weapon on some unmanned drones, you're free to do whatever. Meet new races, do missions for them, trade, buy new items, or conquer them. All of these actions will earn you pilot points. The more pilot points you have, the more respect you'll earn and the better stuff you can buy. The vast scope of this mode is beyond impressive as it is. This is a fully functioning galaxy you can explore at your leisure. If you see a planet, you can go to it, see what it has. Maybe it'll be a lifeless rock, maybe it'll be a fellow spacefaring species, or maybe a planet just getting the hang of its tribal system. Let me just, do him a quick favor. You're free, my friends. As a warrior race, however, instead of taking the time to terraform planets and make colonies yourself, better to just steal them from someone else. That's where the combat of the space stage comes in, and, oh boy. The best way I can show how it feels is with this graph. See the rising part right here? This is where you have some pathetic bombs, missiles, and a laser that can barely scratch a tribal hut, let alone siege a city. You feel like you've been sent back to the tribal stage with how effective your attacks are. Slowly, though, you build up your arsenal to the point that you've got mega weapons, able to take out a city in a matter of a few shots. That's where you're at the peak, and this mode outshines every other mode in the game. However, as you keep on conquering and fighting, slowly the spark begins to leave. It's just not the same blowing up whole cities. There's no variety in how you siege cities, unless you want to do a little eco-terrorism and lower the atmosphere to the point no one can survive. Sadly, the vastness of your playground only serves to exacerbate just how shallow the gameplay is. You'll travel from planet to planet, bombing without a single regard, since no one stands a chance against you. So you may ask what the endpoint of the space stage is. Well, there's not really one. Technically, if you want a goal to work towards outside of conquering everything, you have to fight the legally distinct alien race known as the Groks, who guard the center of the galaxy where the game's final secret lies. However, getting there is easier said than done. The Grok are hyper-aggressive, armed to the teeth, and the gravity at the center of the galaxy is more intense, meaning that regardless of your ship's capabilities, you move at a snail's pace. And if you think allying with the Groks is the key, bad news, cowboy, because you've just run afoul of every single sentient race in existence, because everyone goes to war with you immediately. And what's at the center of the galaxy is hardly worth it, with it just being an item that allows you to terraform planets, which, as you remember, we don't care about. So the center of the galaxy is way too hard to breach, and the star system around it loses its luster not long after finally getting it. Spore ends in this weird place where I really only call one of the phases out and out fun, and even then it's only for a limited amount of time before it goes back to being dull. The only thing more depressing than the squandered potential of Spore itself is the squandered potential of Spore as a franchise. Even using the word franchise with Spore is just weird. Those spin-offs didn't really pan out. Spore Heroes, Arena, Creature Creator. Give EA a little credit, they didn't give up on Spore like it was a Stranger's Wrath or anything, but it kinda diluted what Spore was supposed to be in the first place. Nowhere's this better seen than with Dark Spore. Dark Spore is a game? Yeah, I'm getting word that this is a game, an action RPG in fact, that took Spore's Creature Creator and used it to make these grimdark cyborg-looking guys. This is a Spore game in that it has creature creation. None of the original soul or character lived on in Dark Spore. I say lived because Dark Spore was the straw that broke the camel's back. After it flopped and was completely erased from the world, they shelved the franchise. And with Will Wright no longer with Maxis, it's almost certain that Spore's gone extinct. With all the negative things I've had to say for how most of the game devolves into a slog that I have to force myself to keep playing, and whose appeal is not helped upon replaying, how has Spore managed to stick in our minds as well as it has? If the game was truly out and out bad, just a bad game, how would it still have a dedicated community creating new creations and supporting the base game over 15 years after its release? What game, not franchise, singular game, gets that much love and attention that long after its initial release? Spore is more than just a game. It's a tool for creation, a tool for community, of passion, of childlike wonder. In a way, Will Wright succeeded in his vision for what he wanted Spore to be. Do I think Spore is a fun game? Gun to my head, no. Do I think it's an important game? One that every single person should try at least once? Absolutely.